Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're taking a closer look at Spanish tildes, those little squiggly lines above some vowels. We're going to try to unlock their secrets today with help from Spanish language instructor Jaime Lara. He has some pretty cool insights that he shares in a video lesson about these.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what's really fascinating about those tildes is that they really give us a glimpse into the music of the Spanish language. It's like these tiny conductors shaping the rhythm and flow of the words.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. I always saw them as just, those extra little marks you had to remember. But why are they even there?
Right. So Jaime Lara, he addresses that question head on. He says that, messing up a tilde can completely change a word's meaning. Like, for example, clavo. No, tilde just means nail. Simple enough, right? But if you add a tilde clavo, suddenly it means he nailed or she nailed. So those little squiggles, they've got a lot more power than you might think.
Yeah, like pass me the hammer versus oops, you hammered that wrong.
Exactly. Big difference. So before we get into the actual rules for using tildes, we need to understand how Spanish syllables work, because they're really the foundation of the whole system.
Right, I remember learning about that, like the consonant-vowel rhythm in Spanish words.
You got it. That back and forth between consonants and vowels, that's what creates that beautiful flow that you hear in Spanish words. Like think of España or tomate. You can hear that pattern.
Yeah, España, tomate. And sometimes you get those double consonants too, like in tortilla.
Yes, tortilla. That's a great example. We could do a whole separate deep dive just on double consonants. But for today, let's stick with those single syllables and how they connect to these tildes. Okay, so Lara introduces this concept of the tonic syllable. It's basically just the stressed syllable in a word where we put the emphasis when we speak.
Ah, so in a word like España, the emphasis is on PA, so PA is the tonic syllable.
Precisely. And the location of that tonic syllable is what determines which of three categories a word belongs to. And those categories are agudas, llanas, and esdrújulas.
Esdrújulas. I have to admit, it sounds a bit intimidating. What's the difference between the three?
Don't worry. The names sound more complicated than they actually are. Let's start with agudas. Those are words where the stress is on the very last syllable. Like in calor, meaning heat, the lor gets the emphasis.
Okay, so it's like giving that last syllable an extra oomph.
Exactly. And then llanas, they have the stress on the second to last syllable, like arbol, meaning tree. The emphasis is on bol.
Got it. Second to last. Okay, so what about esdrújulas?
They do sound kind of fancy, don't they? The esdrújulas, the stress is on the third to last syllable. It might seem a bit further back in the word, but listen to this pájaro, meaning bird. You hear how PA gets the emphasis.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. That stress is way back there. It almost changes the feel of the word.
Exactly. And here's the key. Esdrújulas always, always, always have a tilde. It's like a badge of honor for having that stress so far back.
I love that analogy.
Oh, okay.
So esdrújulas easy, always tilde. But what about agudas and llanas? When do they get a tilde and when do they go without?
Okay, so this is where the real tilde rules come in. And honestly, they're pretty logical. For agudas, they only get a tilde if they end in NS or a vowel. So remember, calor, no tilde because it ends in R, but canción, meaning song, ends in N, and the stress is on that last syllable. So bam, it needs a tilde.
Okay, so amor, meaning love, wouldn't need a tilde because it ends in R, even though the stress is on more.
You got it. Now, llanas, it's kind of the opposite. They get a tilde if they don't end in NS or a vowel. So arbol, no tilde, ends in L, but azúcar, for sugar, needs a tilde. It ends in R, and the stress is on that second to last syllable, C-A-R.
So it's all about where the emphasis is and then what letter the word ends in, like a little puzzle.
Exactly. And you know what's really cool? Once you understand these rules, you start to hear the rhythm of Spanish in a whole new way. It's like you can anticipate where the emphasis should go, and it just makes the language come alive.
Yeah, it's not just about memorizing rules.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how they shape the way Spanish sounds and feels.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning. There's actually even more to these tildes than meets the eye.
Wait, there's more. I thought we were done with the tilde rule book.
Well, there's always more to discover with language, right? Remember those double consonants? They can sometimes create what's called a diphthong, which is basically two vowels that combine to create one syllable sound. And guess what? Diphthongs can affect whether a word needs a tilde or not.
Diphthongs. Okay. Now you're speaking my language. I'm really starting to get into this.
And then you have hiatuses, which are the opposite of diphthongs. That's when two vowels are pronounced separately in different syllables. And yep, hiatuses play a role in tilde placement too.
Wow, it's like one of those optical illusions. You think you see one thing and then suddenly, boom, a whole new image pops out. Language is full of those aha moments.
Absolutely. It really is. And those moments are what make learning a language so rewarding. You're constantly discovering these new layers of meaning and beauty.
This deep dive into tildes has been amazing. I feel like I'm hearing Spanish in a completely different way. But before we get ahead of ourselves and jump into those diphthongs and hiatuses, let's take a moment to appreciate what we've learned about these tiny but mighty tildes.
Good idea. So we've learned that tildes in Spanish, they're all about marking that stressed syllable in a word. And we discovered that Spanish words fall into 3 categories based on where that stress falls. Agudas, llanas, and our favorite esdrújulas.
Right, and each category has its own set of rules for when a tilde is needed. And of course, we can't forget that misplacing a tilde can completely change a word's meaning. So they're definitely worth paying attention to.
For sure. Those little squiggles, they might be small, but they pack a powerful punch. So to everyone listening out there, keep practicing those tilde rules. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn.
Exactly. And as you continue your Spanish journey, keep an ear out for those diphthongs and hiatuses. We'll dive into those in a future episode. But for now, let's wrap up this tilded adventure with a little challenge.
Love it. What do you have in mind?
How about this? Why don't you all try coming up with some Spanish words of your own? Words you already know, or even made-up words, and see if you can figure out which ones would need a tilde based on the rules we've learned today. It's a fun way to test your knowledge and keep those tilde rules fresh in your mind.
That's a great challenge. It reminds us that learning a language, it's an active process. The more we engage with it, the more we discover. So keep those brains buzzing, keep those ears perked, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world of language.
Until next time, adios.
Adios. And remember those diphthongs and hiatuses we mentioned? Well, they actually add a whole other layer of complexity to this whole tilde game.
Okay, so tell me more about them. I'm really curious now.
So a diphthong is basically when 2 vowels team up and they create this single syllable sound. Think of the word ciudad, which means city. You hear that W sound in the middle.
Yeah.
So that's a diphthong. The IU, they're working together, and depending on where the stress falls in the word, a tilde might be needed.
Oh, so it's like the vowels are combining forces to make this new sound. That's cool. And what about hiatuses?
Hiatuses are the opposite. Instead of blending together, 2 vowels stand apart and they create 2 separate syllables. Take the word país, meaning country. You can hear that clear separation between the A and the I, right?
Yeah.
That's your hiatus. And just like diphthongs, they can influence whether a tilde is needed or not.
This is crazy. I never realized how much was going on with these little squiggles.
Right. It's like they're the secret code to understanding how Spanish flows and the rhythm of it all. And once you start to see the patterns, it's amazing how much depth they add.
Yeah, I'm definitely inspired now to pay more attention to those diphthongs and hiatuses.
Yeah.
It's like a whole other world of Spanish pronunciation is opening up.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of learning a new language. There's always something new to discover, even in the smallest details. So keep those ears perked up and those brains engaged. You never know what kind of adventures are waiting for you.
I'm ready for them. Bring on the diphthongs. Bring on the hiatuses. I'm ready to conquer these tildes once and for all.
That's the spirit. And remember, even the most seasoned Spanish speakers, they still make mistakes with these tildes. It's all part of the journey. Just embrace the challenge. Have fun with it. And never stop exploring all the hidden wonders of the language.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot today, from the basic rules of tilde placement to these diphthongs and hiatuses. So what are some key takeaways you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that tildes, they're not just random marks. They're essential to understanding how Spanish works. They tell us where to put the emphasis, they guide our pronunciation, and they even help us distinguish between words that would otherwise sound exactly the same.
Absolutely. And we learned that the rules for using tildes are based on the position of that stressed syllable, whether it's an aguda, a llana, or an esdrújula.
Exactly. And we also discovered that diphthongs and hiatuses, they add that extra layer of complexity. But with a little practice and attention to detail, we can master those tilde challenges.
So for all of you listening out there, we encourage you to keep those tilde rules in mind as you continue your Spanish language journey. Pay attention to how the words sound. Listen for those stressed syllables. And don't be afraid to experiment and even make a few mistakes along the way.
And most importantly, have fun with it. Learning a language is an incredible adventure. So keep exploring, keep discovering, and keep those tildes in check.
Great advice. I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of Spanish tildes.
Until next time, adios. You know, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface when it comes to Spanish pronunciation.
Yeah, it really is amazing how much depth there is to even like the most basic parts of a language. And that's what keeps it so interesting, I think.
It really is. Like every time you think you've got something mastered, a whole new layer pops up. Keep things exciting.
Absolutely. And that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive, right? Uncovering those hidden layers and sharing them with you.
Well, I am definitely hooked on these linguistic adventures. So what other mysteries are hiding in Spanish pronunciation? Oh, there are so many. We could talk about regional accents or how Spanish has evolved over time.
Or what about those rolled R's? I've always had trouble with those.
Ah, yes. The rolled R, a classic challenge for Spanish learners. But anyone can master it with enough practice and maybe a bit of tongue gymnastics.
Challenge accepted. I'm ready to roll my way to fluency.
That's the spirit. And you know what? Remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. So enjoy the process and embrace those challenges. And never stop exploring all the richness that Spanish has to offer.
Well said. I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of tildes. But before we go, let's leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay, so here's a thought to ponder. Remember Jaime Lara mentioned that his explanation of tildes was simplified? He focused on the most common cases. So that means there are even more subtle nuances to uncover.
Wait, hold on. There's more. I thought we covered it all.
Well, the thing about language is there are always exceptions to those rules, right? There are always those special cases that keep things interesting.
So it's like we've graduated from tilde kindergarten, and now we're ready for tilde university.
Exactly. And in tilde university, we'll get into all the complexities of diphthongs and hiatuses and every other linguistic quirk you can think of.
I can't wait. I'm definitely feeling inspired to keep learning and exploring. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. And remember, the journey of language learning never really ends. There's always something new to discover, even in those little squiggly lines above the vowels.
Until next time, Idios.
Yeah.
Happy tilde hunting, everyone.